welcome Hannah.
Brilliant. Okay, right. Gonna share my screen. Oh, sorry. Great, okay, so hopefully that presentation is up. So thank you, Kat. It's a great privilege to be able to lead this webinar on mental health in children and young people, with particular focus on preparing them to return back to school in September. So firstly, a little bit about myself. So I'm passionate about seeing children and young people thrive. And as Carl said, I'm currently the Wellbeing Lead for a Christian charity called Phase, which is based in Hitchin. And at Phase, our focus is to promote good mental health and wellbeing, working in both primary schools and secondary schools in Hitchin. My background is in psychology, education and theology, and I'm passionate about bringing all three of those together. And I was previously a youth worker for 5 years before my role as Wellbeing Lead. At Phase, we are passionate about working alongside children and young people to improve their wellbeing so that they are able to flourish, thrive and be all that God has created them to be. Our focus is on prevention, promoting good mental health and supporting young people. And whilst we're passionate about supporting young people, studies, statistics and experience show us that actually children and young people are facing huge difficulties much, much earlier, especially now in the light of the pandemic. And I love this quote from Desmond Tutu. It says that there comes a point where we need to stop just pulling people out of the river, and we need to go upstream and find out why they're falling in. And mental health is on a continuum, and today's focus is on helping to equip and prepare you, your children, your family, those in children and young people in your youth groups about how to help them be prepared over the holiday as they look to return to school. Working upstream and with strategies and ideas so that when they go back to school, they have the coping mechanisms and strategies to be able to draw upon. And my prayer is that the resources that I share with you today in this webinar will help and support you on this journey. And so as I reflect on lockdown, it can definitely feel like a roller coaster. I don't know about you, but some days are good, some days are tough, some days are just filled with confusion. And maybe for you, lockdown has been super busy, busier than pre-lockdown. Your job has required you to work more, you're a key worker, you've had to perhaps learn how to juggle work with homeschooling. Or maybe actually it's been quiet, it's felt isolating, there's been financial strain, loss, or you've been on furlough. And there's probably even situations that I'm not even aware of that you have been through during this time. And I'm not a parent myself, however, I've been working very closely with children, young people, families and schools during this time. And I asked a few people who I know who are parents to describe their time during lockdown. And here are some of the things that they said. They said, my children are 3 and 6, so their needs are very different. And in addition to this, both my husband and I have had jobs that went into overdrive in the lockdown. So juggling their needs along with work was awful. As a parent, I have watched my once confident daughter become anxious and worried to leave the house. The best thing about being in lockdown has been being stuck at home with my wife and children, and the worst thing about being in lockdown has been being stuck at home with my wife and children. And the last one, which I'm sure we can resonate with, is what day is it? Lockdown has been a roller coaster of emotions and continues to be something that we are all navigating as we look ahead to a new landscape, as we look ahead to a new normal. And when talking with schools, one of the main needs that we are seeing from children, young people and families is anxiety around returning to school in September. Young Minds carried out a survey in July with young people with a history of mental health needs and found that 80% of respondents agreed that the coronavirus pandemic had made their mental health worse. 87% of respondents agreed that they had felt lonely or isolated during the lockdown period. These statistics show the impact that there has been on children and young people's mental health during this time. And as we look to September, many questions are being asked around how will it work? What will support bubbles look like in school? And I think it's important to acknowledge that there is a lot of uncertainty around September. You know, even schools, as we chat to them, they're coming up with multiple plans. The guidelines are continually changing. And so with this in mind, how can you help your child, your grandchild, the children in your children's group, youth groups, your church family? How can you help prepare them for returning to school in September and manage the anxiety that goes with it? And so as we look at how we can prepare children and young people over the summer for September, I've broken it down into 4 R's that I hope just will help you feel equipped with tools to help. And I want this webinar to give you some practical ideas that you can take away and you can try. And so the 4 R's are recognise, routine, resilience, and respond. So firstly, recognise. It's so important to recognise the journey that we've all been on, that we are not all in the same boat, but we are in the same storm. Going back to the quotes earlier on, our stories, our journeys have all been different. The joys, the challenges, the losses. The emotion of your boat will be different, and it can be easy to get caught up in comparing with others. However, each experience is valid. Each one of us has our own story to tell. And it's important to recognise that as adults, and it's important to help children and young people be able to recognise that as well. It's important to recognise that beneath every behaviour there is a feeling, and beneath each feeling is a need. And perhaps you're a parent of a young child and their behaviour during this time has changed. 1 minute they're happily playing and the next they're screaming the house down. Or perhaps you've noticed how a once outgoing child or young person has become withdrawn and doesn't want to leave the house. Beneath the behaviour that is being displayed, there will be a feeling and a need. And recognising the different emotions that are being felt by ourselves, but also children and young people, is crucial. You know, over this time there would have been things that have been missed, those end of year school trips, the leaving primary school, not sitting exams, the emotion of being around people all the time or not being around people, not being able to do certain things, mixed messaging, missing friends and family, and not fully understanding what is happening. It's important to be able to create a safe space, to be able to process those different emotions, to listen and validate, not making assumptions. And it's important to recognise that you don't have to have all the answers or pretend that you know. It's about being honest with them and providing a safe space for them to do that, to meet them where they're at. Small things such as listening make a huge difference and help make a huge difference. You're helping them recognise their worries. A strategy which is shown to be helpful is deferring worries. So getting them to write down things that are on their mind, but then coming back to them later on in the day, or even having a set worry time that they have. One of my mentees, she had a worry box that she'd write her worries down and then she'd put them in that box. You could spend time praying, turning worries into prayer, handing them over to God. Perhaps you could have a prayer box that you write down your worries in and then you put them in that box, and then that's a way of physically handing them over and giving them to God. So some other practical tools to help recognise the different emotions that are being felt. So one way is breathing techniques. So just encouraging them to stop, to pause and breathe, especially if they're overwhelmed by emotions, to just take a few deep breaths. And there are a number of breathing exercises that you can do, but a really great one, especially for children, it's really easy. It's using their hand, and it's taking their hand and breathing in and breathing out, breathing in and breathing out as they go up and down their fingers. A second way is gratitude journal. So focusing on the things that you're thankful for, praising and thanking God. This could be something that you do as a family or as a youth group over WhatsApp. As part of the youth group that I lead, we did this. We challenged each other to say something that we were thankful for each day. And it was just a really great way of being able to focus on these things. You could have a thankfulness jar. Now, when we focus on the things that we're thankful for, it starts to shift our mindset. And we've created a resource for this, a gratitude journal, which you can download, and you can just write down like 3 things each day that you are thankful for. Another thing is a wellbeing box. So a bit like a first aid box, which has a plaster in for when you hurt yourself. A wellbeing box could have things in that will be able to help your child calm down when worried. For example, having in it colouring sheets, cuddly toy, a photo. It can be helpful to include items of the 5 senses. I did this once with a group of young people in a support group, and we made wellbeing boxes just using cardboard, and they absolutely loved it. They had fun decorating them, and they loved being able to put things in it that would help calm down when experiencing a number of different emotions. And it was helping them to be able to learn how to manage their emotions in positive and healthy ways. And lastly, a circle of control. And so this is about recognising what you can control and what you can't control. Now, there's many things that we can't control, but there's also things that we can. And it's important to be able to recognise that. And the circle of control is a great resource. We use it at Phase with a number of our mentees. And we've also created a short video which explains this in more detail. And the idea is to focus time and energy on the things that you can control. It's important to help children, young people recognise that actually when they go back to school, it is going to be different, and that's something that is out of their control. But actually trying to gain as much information as possible and preparing for it is within their control. And you can use this resource to talk through different things, perhaps different things that are worrying them, and work out, is it something that they can control, that they can put their time and energy into, or is it actually something that is out of their control? But in all of this, we have the comfort, we know that ultimately God is in control, and whilst it's unknown to us, it is known to him, and that he will be with us in the storm. Lastly, recognise where change has been experienced before. Look back even over lockdown and see how you have adapted. Share stories of where you can see change. Think about what you have learned. What did you do previously to manage the change? How can you take that learning forward to help you? If you could give your future self some advice, what would it be? You know, children, young people over this time have had to really quickly adapt. They've had to manage homeschooling. They've had to manage their own time, perhaps earlier than they would have had to do. And in all of this, it's important to get them to reflect on their experience, to be still, to take that analogy of the boat and reflect what has been good, what has been challenging, what have they learned, what are they going to take forward from this time? Actually, how might their learning help them when they experience change again? And acknowledge that you're learning together, you're learning as a family, you're learning as a youth group, as a church. And that even in the change, there may be opportunities or things that can be gained and are positive from the change. So our second R is routine. So this is something which for many, as we know, the routine we had has been lost. And something that I personally have found really helpful during lockdown is developing a routine. It's something that I really enjoy to have. I know that over lockdown it's had to adapt, it's had to change. And however, there are still some key markers that now form part of my routine. And a routine helps our brain to know what is happening, and it helps to give structure. And for children in particular, it can help them feel safe and settled. Morning and evening routines are particularly helpful. And as you build your routine, it's thinking about what are those key markers that help form that. From mentoring young people, I know that some of the things that they've really struggled is this lack of routine, with boredom kicking in. I've been mentoring one young person. He was really struggling with motivation and boredom. And we were talking about what he loves, and he loves space. And so for our next session, I set him the goal, a project, for him to tell me the most 5 interesting facts that he thought I would like to know about space for the next session. And that gave him a goal, it gave him something to focus on. And he loved being able to tell me his 5 facts about space the following week. And when we're thinking about building a routine, it's thinking about what are those things that bring joy, that bring life, that help you to relax, that help you to connect with others. It's talking through this with children, young people, finding out those things that you can build into a routine. And as you look ahead to the summer, what does your routine look like? What does the routine look like in September? Is it going to look different to what it previously was? And at Phase, we've created a resource around the 5 ways to wellbeing, and there's 5 short videos. And to go alongside it is this wellbeing plan. And this can help form part of a routine that gives you ways to build these things in, that you could do as a family, that you could do in your youth groups. Just helps bring those ideas. And another area which we have seen affected during this time is sleep. We know that sleep is so important for our well-being. It helps us to be able to focus. It helps us handle difficulties well. And a number of the young people I've spoken to, they have got out of a sleep routine. They're getting up at 1, 2 in the afternoon. But it's important, especially kind of over the summer and heading towards the end, and as school times return, that a good sleep routine is in place in order to be able to cope with all that comes. So our third R is resilience. And so resilience is a real buzzword, and it's being used a lot at the moment, but it is something which is really important, and it's something that I'm really, really passionate about, that has been brought out of personal experience to be resilient, and something that I know that God is continuing to teach me. And building resilience is really important for good mental health. The most popular definition of resilience is the capacity to resist or bounce back from adversity. The good news though, resilience is something which can be built, grown, developed and cultivated. It's like a muscle. The more we use it, the more it grows and develops. Resilience is something that can be cultivated in relationships and communities. It's a lifelong project for us all. And therefore, instead of thinking about the question of how much resilience do I have, we should be asking the question, how do I build resilience? And what does resilience look like from a biblical perspective? Well, 2 Corinthians 4:8-9 says, we are hard pressed on every side, but not crushed. Perplexed, but not in despair. Persecuted, but not abandoned. Struck down, but not destroyed. And, maybe that's how we feel as we're in this time or have felt. But I want to encourage us, let's hold on to the strength from God. He can help us in times of difficulty. To reach out to him in amidst this time of challenge and suffering, keeping our eyes fixed on him and not the waves around us. Sometimes we have to go through situations. They can't be taken away from us. And therefore, it's about being equipped with the skills and the tools to be able to manage the situation that is being faced. And I find this image of weighing scales really helpful. So one side is being weighed down by the problem. It can't be taken away. So for example, going back to school, the children and young people that we know, they are going to have to go back to school. But what are some of the ways that they can manage that to bring it back to balance? Thinking back to the circle of control, what are some of those things that can be controlled in the situations? What are the tools that can be drawn upon in order to manage the situation? For example, asking questions, having that space where they can do that, having opportunity to connect with friends again. Speaking with a number of children and young people, it's something that they're worried about. They haven't seen their friends in a while. They're worried whether their friends are still going to like them after this time, how to interact with them. Perhaps if you haven't done the school run for a while, do that with them. Try on their school uniform and pray together. You can use this image with different situations. Ask them what are they worried about, and then work through what the different solutions are to the problem. In all of this, it's helping them to be a problem solver, to look for the solutions. If one solution doesn't work, then help them work through that. Help them have that growth mindset to learn from the mistakes. It's providing them a space where they can ask questions. And, sometimes the solutions or answers to the questions, they may feel uncomfortable. It might not be the answer that we want. It might push us out of our comfort zone. But I love this quote from Brené Brown where she says, it's not about being afraid to lean into discomfort. It's not being afraid to lean into discomfort. And actually, when we're in discomfort, sometimes that's where growth can happen, where we learn. And it might not be comfortable, but it's actually encouraging them to embrace the challenge. And in all of it, encouraging them to make the next right choice in the situation that they are facing. And whilst with bouncing back, it might be quick in some cases. However, it often isn't. It can be a struggle. It can take time, and it requires effort in order to be able to bounce back. And it's important to understand the process which happens, the growth and the learning which can take place as a consequence of the process. Therefore, it's recognising that it isn't just always bouncing back, but it's the journey, the growth, and the learning which takes place. I just want to quickly introduce to you the idea of these 3 C's of resilience to process the process that we can go through. And they are circumstance, choice, and consequence. And again, this is a resource which is available for you to download. So you can work through it, probably more aimed at secondary school age. But you can take the circumstance and work through it. So firstly, circumstance, this is what we're faced with. Perhaps it is going back to school, or it's a disappointment, or friendship difficulties, or moving school. Something happens. and its changes around us. Then comes the second part, the critical part. As we're down, there's a choice that has to be made, that next right choice. Are we going to embrace, are we going to go through the situation? Are we going to draw upon the tools and the skills that we know in order to be able to face the challenge, to face the circumstance? In all of it, there is choice, and a choice to be resilient. And in that is then thinking about what are the consequences, both the short term and the long term, of the choice that's going to be made. And the interesting thing here, sometimes the short-term consequence can feel hard, it can feel difficult, but actually in the long run, it's right. It can be positive. Like the saying, short-term pain for long-term gain. So that's just a resource that can be helpful to just take a situation and to be able to work through it. And another resource, at Phase, we've created a Building Resilience video series, again, primarily aimed at secondary school age, although we are working on something for primary school. And the series looks at support, adaptability, purpose, and self-care, and how all of these are ways in which we can build resilience. And there's resources to go alongside the videos to just try and make it as practical and helpful as possible to be able to help a child or young person be able to work through it, taking this idea of how do I build my resilience. And lastly, the last R is respond. So recognise routine and resilience. All of these help build towards the response. And as we head into September, there will continue to be times of change and things that perhaps come up unexpectedly. But it's thinking about how we respond that's important, the choices that are being made. And it's how we respond that makes the difference. We have a choice to draw upon tools and skills. And when we can't necessarily control what is happening, it is challenging ourselves to control our response. As Charles Swindoll quotes, it says, life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you react. Now, I'm a massive Gareth Malone fan, and I love how he has responded to lockdown and the need that he saw. How singing is used as a response and how it can be a great way to be able to process emotions and to be able to build well-being. And I just want to share a short clip of a song that he has brought together that has been written by the 16-year-old boy that you'll see in the video, who decided that actually he wanted to sing from his church because it was a place of significance and importance to him. So I'm just going to share the clip.
Everyone will be feeling that slight nervous energy, even though they might just be in their sitting room. There's something special about this. We know that we're bringing together people from all over the country, and that excites me.
Loneliness, isolation, depression and anxiety, grief and mourning is flooding our society, draining of our key workers and fear from us all, tiredness in our nurses and missing our loved ones. But this is just another storm, and every storm must fade. This is just another storm. We will remain together. This is just another storm. We will rebuild together.
This is just another storm, and we will rebuild together. And I think it's important to acknowledge that we are going to be rebuilding as the landscape looks different, as we head into a new normal. School communities will be rebuilding, families will be rebuilding, churches will be rebuilding. But it's not something that has to be rebuilt alone, but something that we can do in communities, drawing upon God's strength, God's guidance, and God's wisdom to help us, and being able to respond in prayer. So recognise routine and resilience all help us to be able to respond when we think about returning to school in September. And at Phase, we've created a toolbox of resources of a number of short videos. And so there's a video, if you know someone who's transitioning from year 6 to year 7, it's a great resource of around 20 minutes. And there's extra resources to go alongside it, particularly thinking about friendship, about time management. So it's a great way just to be able to sit down with them, be able to help talk through perhaps some of the worries that they may have. There's another video looking around coping with change, which again picks up on some of the things that I've mentioned this morning. So thinking about recognising different emotions, building that routine. There's the Building Resilience series, which I mentioned as well. It's kind of those 5 videos looking at what resilience is and how we can build it. And then there's the 5 Ways to Wellbeing, again, a series of 5 short videos, and the Wellbeing Plan, which goes alongside that. And then we've also created a video around internet safety. And this was something that actually was in response to the schools. They saw a need, they were recognising that actually children and young people are spending a huge amount of time online, probably actually even more than they were before lockdown. And this video just helps to get young people thinking about when they're online, how can they be aware, how can they be mindful, how can they be vigilant whilst they are online. And so the videos are also accompanied by downloadable resources, so you can access these from our website, and it just hopefully just helps make it practical. And there's different ones. So there's the gratitude journal, which I mentioned earlier. There's tips around how to get a good night's sleep. There's a goal setting one, the 3 C's of resilience, a sheet to help you think through what are some of those things that bring you joy that you could build into your routine. And so as we draw the presentation part of this webinar to a close, I hope that it has provided some thoughts and practical ideas around how to help prepare children and young people for school over the summertime and as we head into September. And in all of it, it's important to recognise that children and young people, they have different needs, they have different learning styles. And so what works for one child might not work for another. And that's okay. It's about finding out what works for you and the children and people that you work with. So I hope that's been helpful, and I'm now going to hand back over to Carl as we have a time of questions.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Hannah. I wonder if you can take off the stop screen share. That would be brilliant. Fantastic. Thank you so much. I'm going to ask for everyone, if you can just keep yourselves muted, that would be helpful, and write questions in the box, if that's okay. And you can write them either directly to me or write them to everyone. So if you go for the Zoom group chat box, and we'll just run through a couple of questions that have come in already. One of them is just a practical one, Hannah. Near the beginning of the presentation, you mentioned a survey that was done with kind of a dramatic stat, and it was a question, do you know where the source of that survey came from?
Oh yeah, so that was from Young Minds.
You did watch for that, yeah.
Young Minds, which is a mental health service. They've
Okay.
done a whole report on it, which you can download from their website.
So Young Minds it is. That's really helpful to hear that. There's another question that has come in, which is how can you identify the feeling and need behind behaviours for children who are too young to express them? So this is someone thinking particularly of Key Stage 1 children. I guess this is a fairly common issue. How would you identify the feelings and needs behind some of the behaviours that Key Stage 1 children might be expressing?
Yeah, I guess it's just kind of looking out for their behaviour. Like, is anything kind of changing? Are they like, how do they respond? Are they particularly more emotional than they might be? Are they kind of how are they responding to situations? Are they lashing out more? Are they becoming more upset? Are they withdrawing within themselves? Are they not wanting to eat? Are they having difficulty sleeping? Like, are you noticing anything that is changing within their kind of normal pattern and how they have been before, and kind of recognizing that in that actually there might be something going on that they can't express, but something is worrying them. So kind of just being aware of how they're behaving and noticing if anything's changed within them.
That's great, and I'm guessing that that might be parents, it could be grandparents, it could be any number of different people. I know teaching staff do this the whole time. Just in terms of some of the resources, that obviously there's quite a library of resources that are built up there. I know that kind of in conversation you have been up for just gauging what would be helpful for people as well.
Yeah.
So it might be, if that is the case, because I don't want to put words in your mouth, if that is the case, just to be able to say something about that and how people might be able to get to you guys ideas about resources that might be helpful.
Yeah, I was going to say we're really up for just being able to know what we can do in order to be able to respond in order to kind of needs that are happening. So if you see kind of or are aware of a particular need or something that you're facing within your family or seeing within your children, young people, then do let us know. I sent out like a survey before holidays to schools, just asking some of them what were some of the needs that they were seeing. So some of the things that they came back with was this whole idea of actually they were seeing that children and young people were anxious about going back to school. That was the key thing that kept coming back. Anxiety is huge. This idea of change, friendships, like that keeps coming up, that actually they're really worried about friendships and whether their friends are still going to like them, or if they have to keep social distance, how are they going to interact, or are they going to be in the same bubble as their friends? All of those sort of questions that are worrying them. And also just this idea to be able to process lockdown and to be able to reflect on the experience that they've been through, because as we acknowledged at the beginning, everyone has had a different experience of this. Yes, it's been the same storm, but the boat that they've been in has been different. And so I think it's important to help them be able to acknowledge that and have that space to be able to process. But yeah, any needs that you're seeing, then do I've put my email address at the beginning, I'll put it in the chat, then do email, and we're really open to kind of knowing what the need is and thinking, okay, how can we respond to this? What's a resource that we can put together for schools, that we can put together for churches? How can we help equip children, young people, families, youth workers, so that we are able to help children and young people be able to survive this time and even thrive in it.
That's very helpful, thank you. There's Zoe, I'm going to come to your question, but that actually is quite a useful link to something else that we're going to mention. So before I ask your question, there's a question that's come in. Do you have any resources for children with additional needs?
No, we don't have any specific ones at the moment. But again, if there's something in particular that you'd be interested in, then that's definitely an area that we could perhaps look into doing.
I guess that is an area that's a fairly broad area, because additionally covers such a broad area. But if there's particular things, then do get in contact with the guys at Phase, Hannah and the guys at Phase, about that. If there are any other questions, please do keep them coming. If there's anything particularly that you're wanting to ask Hannah while she's on screen, then please do pop a question in the box. Zoe's asked a question, which is about what are your feelings about what schools work will look like in September, children in bubbles groups, and allowing visitors. I guess there's an element of this question that is about lockdown and restrictions and what have you. So it'd be great if you've got any thoughts about that. This is certainly a linked question, but also how can we offer support to schools specifically in September? So that would be great to hear your thoughts on those.
Yeah, so I guess like in response to what it's going to look like with schools, like, I think the thing is it's changing constantly. I think guidelines are changing. So I think it's definitely taking a lead from the schools. I mean, some schools will say, yeah, you can come in, but you've got to follow these strict guidelines. Some schools will just be like, no, we're not having any external people in at all. So we've moved all our mentoring virtually online, and I imagine that that's how it's going to continue. But in all of it, we're just taking guidance from the school, because as to whether they're going to let us in. And so I think that's the main thing, is talking to the schools and seeing what they're saying as to whether they're even going to allow external people, because there are fresh guidelines out yesterday around schools and what it looks like. So it could change in a few weeks. I know, talking to schools, they were saying they've got multiple plans in place depending on what the guidelines are come September. So it really is trying to be adaptable. And I think in supporting schools, I think the important thing is to ask them. So I mean, if you've got a good relationship with them, with the head or the Senko or the pastoral team, finding out the person to connect and just be like, we're available, what are some of the ways in which we can support? So we're looking at trying to put tutor activities together, lesson plans together, that we know that we're probably not going to be able to go in and deliver, but we're putting some material together around this idea of lockdown reflections that they could just run and that they could use. And so I think it's just asking them, what do they need, and what is the best way in which you can help them out, and what does that look like, and just being open to be adaptable, being open to sort of respond or perhaps even change at the last minute as to what the delivery looks like.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Hannah. And just before we come to a close, I want to suggest a couple of ways that as churches, as Christian organisations, we might be able to serve schools, not just in September, but possibly more through as the lockdown is lifted on into the future in this really important area. I think I've said to Hannah, if we could multiply the Phase team 1,000 times over, every city, town and village could do with a Phase team one way or another. It would be wonderful. The story of Phase is a 10-year-old, at least one, of developing, but there are things I think that we can do and begin to work on together as Christian organisations and churches to serve our children and young people. I'll suggest a couple of things just before the end. Hannah, there's a question coming here, which is just a really tough situation that someone's facing with a 6-year-old boy who's point blank refusing to go back to school, or even to talk about going back to school. It's just really a question, is it worth just leaving it, or trying to encourage them to talk about it over the next few weeks? What would be a good approach for a 6-year-old who's refusing to go back?
Refusing to go back. I think, maybe just trying to create that space in which he can talk, or trying to perhaps even maybe tap into some of the things that he enjoys. So maybe if he's arty or creative, maybe just try and get him to draw a picture of kind of explaining how he's feeling or what's going on, just get him to draw a picture and see what happens, or into Lego or something. Maybe there's an interest that he's got, try and use that to somehow get him to express through that what he's feeling, and just kind of maybe through that then something might come up that you can then pinpoint, and just trying to create that time, or trying to kind of, yeah, I guess maybe even just trying to write down a word. But I think with children especially, I think art can be a really helpful way, and you can tell a lot through drawing. So that could be something that you try. I'm trying to think what else you could do. Yeah, and I think just say try and talk, or try and kind of think of ways in which he can manage the emotions. So thinking back to sort of like that, and that wellbeing box, having that toolbox that kind of think of things that you can do. So perhaps if he's feeling worried, thinking about, okay, he can breathe, or thinking about those things that he can go to help sort of try and manage those emotions.
It might also be worth just putting out, my guess would be that the person that's written this one in, I would doubt that yours is the only 6-year-old that's refusing to go back to school in September in that school. And so yeah. My feeling would be that teaching and support staff in the boys' school, I'm thinking it might be your son, might be able to offer some support to help with that situation as well. It might well be worth, as you're able, once they're open, to get in contact with them so that they're aware of the situation, and to gain their suggestions too, specifically with how they might be encouraging pupils to get back in from their schools too.
Yeah, I think it definitely on that. I think it's something that the schools are so aware, like they are so aware that children are going to be finding it hard to be able to come back in school in September. Like, you know, speaking to them, it's one of the needs that they're seeing the most. So I imagine that they will definitely be putting things in place as well to be able to help children and young people as they come back to school in that.
Really helpful. There's no more questions that have come at the moment. If there are questions people have got, please do type them in the group chat box. I just wanted to say before we kind of come into a close, and just a few thoughts to close. Hannah, if you want to comment, please do as well.
Yeah.
So this webinar will be available online from tomorrow, which you can watch again, or you can share with others. And the URL I've just put in the group chat box there, vimeo.com/SWBA. So please do watch it back and share it with others. Today, I know there's a number of people that were either at work and couldn't make it, or they're actually away on holiday, and the Wi-Fi's let them down. So please do share this with others if that's going to be helpful. Just in conversation with Hannah and with others, one of the things in my role that I do is just try and identify some ways that churches might be able to serve people in their local community. And that's been happening in all kinds of ways over the lockdown period, as I'm sure you're all aware. But what I hear from schools workers, from particularly that are involved with churches and Christian organisations, is by and large a willingness, a real openness in schools for others who will be able to come in, generally on a voluntary basis, to serve the people in those schools. Hannah, this is what you guys at Phase have been doing now for however many years. Yeah. In other words, the opening is available, and it's really, really there. The question is how might we respond to that as Christian organisations, as churches, in a way that is responsible and in a way that is likely to be helpful. So there were 2 suggestions to make, and I'd just really love for you to be able to fill in a survey for me. I'm just going to put the URL into the chat box now, which will give us some ideas about kind of how you feel this webinar's been, but also give you opportunities to respond. The 2 thoughts are to create safe spaces in schools, something that Phase has done to a certain degree. And for those that are aware of Renew Wellbeing, it's a Christian charity, safe spaces that are available in local communities is something that churches have been running successfully for a while. There is opportunity for some training for churches to have people who would be able to offer safe spaces in schools. And so please, if you are interested in that, fill that in under the survey monkey questionnaire there, and I can get some details to you for how that might happen. Beyond that, something else that Hannah mentioned is mentoring in schools, and that's requires certainly some more training, but it's certainly something that there are a number of organisations, including ourselves, that are considering offering to those in churches for what would be some training so that you could be a mentor for individuals in schools to support children and young people in schools. This is something that is according to demand. So if there are those in churches and Christian organisations that are interested in that kind of training, then it'd be great to hear about that. So if you can fill in that survey and click on it just before you leave in a moment, and let us know your thoughts. I'd really appreciate that at the end today. Do check back on the webinar on our Vimeo channel from tomorrow morning. Lastly, I just want to say thank you, Hannah. That was outstanding, and as I strongly suspected it would be. The bottom line is that we are indebted to those of you who have been working in this area now for so many years. We've always, I think, known that there has been the need, but this media means that we've had people from across the country just get a taste today of some of the work that you do, and particularly so valuable resources that you're producing online at the moment. If you do find a way to clone yourselves, please do let us know, because ultimately that would be the answer, I think.
Yeah.
But please, we want for you to be an integral part, as much as you're willing, of the developing thoughts of churches and organisations in this hugely important area. So please do keep the resources coming and ideas that you've got. But yeah, I know the rest of you are on mute. I'm going to give you a
Thank you.
so, is there anything particularly that you wanted to add before we just draw into a close?
No, I don't think so, but just honestly, if you've got any questions or that haven't been answered or that come to mind after this webinar, or a particular need that you're seeing, then do just email me, and I'll put my email in, and yeah, I'll be happy to answer any more questions and respond to that. So, and thank you just for having the opportunity to be able to share about this.
The other thing that would be helpful in that SurveyMonkey survey as well is if there are other things that webinars might be helpful for, then I'm prepared to somewhere between twist the arm and offer great riches to Hannah and the guys from Phase for further webinars in the future. So if there are things that you think particularly would be helpful for future webinars, do put that in the survey as well. Lots of thanks coming in from lots of people here, so you can read back that in a second.
Yeah.
Some of you, depending on what you're watching this particular gadget on, will be able to save the group chat. So if you would like to do that, where you would type in, there's normally a box with 3 dots in it at the bottom of the group chat. If you click that box, a drop-down menu will appear, and one of the things on it are save chat, and that will save the chat to your computer. Although I'm also going to do that, and if you want the chat, email me back and I will email it to you. It's been a pleasure to have you guys with us today. Thank you so much. Thank you again, Hannah. And please do fill in that SurveyMonkey now. The URL's right there at the bottom of the group chat, so click on that and fill it in for me on your way out. That would be appreciated. It'll take you about 3 minutes, I suspect. But God bless you, and as we continue to try and serve the people in our communities, may you know the Spirit of God's power and strength. May you know the blessing of God in all that you do to serve him and the people who he loves, which is all people in your community. Bless you, and we'll catch up soon. Bye for now. Bye-bye.